Hey, it's Chris with Games. So, as always, one of your favorite videos of the month, we're talking about Don't Get It at Retail, where I try and convince you all of the hotness that is showing up at retail this month. The biggest 10 games I can find showing up at retail, and I'm going to try and convince you not to buy any of them, because you don't need more games. You don't need those games specifically. Don't FOMO, don't pre-order, don't try and get them. But you know what? As always, as one or two people in the comment section always miss this part, right? Look, I'm trying to tell you, you don't need them for X, Y, and Z. If I'm wrong, or if you really think it's a great fit for you and you know it, you know what? You say, Chris, those comments don't stop me from getting it. I'm still gonna get it anyway. Awesome. Awesome. Do you? I am completely okay with that. I'm just also trying to say, you know what? I know you can fill out that $100 pre-order, that $75 pre-order at Game Nerds or Miniature Market, wherever it needs to be, right? To get free shipping. But just because you can, should you? Let's go. Now this month, we actually have some games you've heard of, but also some games that you may not have heard. And again, these are games coming out this month, not games that you can pre-order, because a couple of those have also come out, right? Like, I can pre-order this 2 or 3 months in advance. We're not talking about those. We'll save those for the months they're actually released. So, the biggest one, the first one, the one that has gotten the most attention, the one that makes me kind of want to buy a second edition of a game I already own, which doesn't happen at all, El Grande. El Grande has a new art edition. Isn't this freaking awesome of how cool this cover looks? I like the art, folks. I do. I'm well, not a simp. I just kind of like it. At the same time, you know what? Chris, this game hasn't stood the test of time. Chris, this game isn't any good anymore. Chris, games more recently eclipsed this because they're fancier, they have bigger rule books, and they're more parts as a whole that I get to punch out and put together. I mean, I'm being facetious here, folks. El Grande is a top game of all time for me. It's a top probably 10, 20 game for me, period, in my collection. I ended up trading for a copy of the big box, I don't know, a year ago. I freaking love it. And to be frank with you guys, if you don't have a copy of El Grande, I'm going to break the rule at the beginning of this video and say, you know what, go get this. Because this is an all-time great. Now, that being said, this game's not going to change your mind if you don't like the potentially very heavy take that mechanic of it in the first place. There is some potential also hate drafting of those cards that are going to be available to you on a round-by-round basis. This also plays best at, probably at least 4, maybe 5 even. And if you're one of those people that the new art edition does nothing for you, well, awesome. I mean, that's an easy pass from you from that standpoint. But the one thing I'll say is that this has been widely unavailable. So unlike the rest of this stuff that you FOMO'd on crowdfunding, or maybe that you're deciding whether or not I'm going to get the pre-order exclusive promo, whatever here, right? This is, a fantastic game. But it's also not going to change your mind if you really don't like those mechanics, right? Like, there's a reason I don't have a copy of Brass in my collection, correct? There's a reason I don't have a copy of Twilight Imperium or Twilight Struggle, right? Certain things are not going to change my mind or change what I can get to the table. And so, as great as this game is, if you don't have that group dynamic, or your group doesn't like those two things in the first place, folks, where's the lie? You're not going to have your mind changed. You're not all of a sudden going to sprout up 2 extra players to be able to play this at the 4 and 5 player counts repeatedly that this is so good at. So from that aspect of things, as good as the price is, as good as now the availability is, you know what also will be available 6 months or a year from now? This. So get it when you can actually play it. Get it when you can actually play with it. Let's take that twist. Let's spin that a little bit differently here. The time of me filming this, Earthborne Rangers just launched. Anyone else want to call that Earthborne Heroes? Like, every time I think of that, Earthborne Heroes runs off the tongue instead of Earthborne Rangers. Oh no, Chris is going to talk about rambling instead of the game mechanics. Folks, again, my channel, if you're new here, I do that a lot. But Earthborne Rangers, right? This is the LCG for Earth lovers. Sort of facetious there, but they're really going heavy into the eco-friendly, mechanical, thematic, as well as incorporating it into the production, right? But I'll make the argument that don't get it at retail right now. Back the crowdfunding project. But that's the thing right now is you can't really get it at retail, so you might have to save yourself some money. But the pre-orders are ranging anywhere from $80 to $100. And the core game on GameFound right now is $80. So can you afford to wait? Yeah, you can. Because you know what? If you're an LCG junkie, I'm going to make the argument right here, right? You have enough LCG to play through. I know you do. I know you do. And the other side of things with this, right? From an LCG standpoint, that has to be the main thought and the main interest. Because this is primarily, like most LCGs, not all, not exclusively, I would argue that a lot of the main repeated offenders, myself included, right? For these LCGs, you play solo. You play two-handed. And so I don't think this LCG is going to be that much dramatically different. And just like the other LCGs, I mean, maybe even a little bit more so with just the intro here, has a steeper learning curve as a whole. So that in combination with wanting to pick it up at retail, I mean, that's fine. Maybe you want to do the retail side of things, but you're better off getting it at crowdfunding. So yeah, I'm twisting the second one again too, telling you to get it on crowdfunding instead of retail, because you can't really find it at retail anyway right now because it's all sold out because people are hyping over it. Very similarly, do you do LCG? Do you do deck construction? Do you want, and this is the other thing it's offering now, a campaign to go along with it? A campaign and open world campaign. Do you need direction? I have found that narrative open world experiences on board games for me have not been the best fit. I like the idea of it, right? Just like I like the idea of it in a video game. But if you're like me, you get sidetracked. You don't stay focused. Sorry, I can't even say that with a straight face on a video like this. The irony is just too strong with this one today. But that's what you've got essentially going on. And from my standpoint, I just don't find as much fulfillment. I like an objective. I like a victory point. I like an end game boss, right? And again, I'm not saying that this doesn't necessarily have some of that, but is it going to have enough to entice you from those aspects, right? At least with the other ones, like Marvel Champions. Okay, I'm beating this boss. Lord of the Rings, I have to achieve this quest, this objective, whatever, XYZ. Arkham Horror, same thing. And this, I mean, again, not being super knowledgeable about it, but it's more open world. I mean, that's the feature of it. And it's a bigger price point to entry. That's probably the other aspect that you need to be aware of if you're buying it at retail, or, you know, you're buying it off secondhand retail, if you will, if nothing else. $80. And with it being unavailable in the main retail, you're probably going to pay a premium if you're buying it off a scalper. I mean, secondary market. I say that jokingly. I've done that too. I'm not immune to that. If you're buying it off of someone else who doesn't like it, you're probably going to pay a premium. And that's where, you know, something like a core box of Marvel Champions you buy on the secondary market could cost you $20 to $30 right now. You buy a core box with a couple expansions of Arkham Horror or Lord of the Rings, maybe not the new Lord of the Rings, but the old version, slightly less pleasing aesthetically version. I mean, you could probably get a couple expansions to go along with it for half that price. And that, therein lies the problem, right? Bigger barrier to entry, bigger learning curve, prettier aesthetic, but is it going to fit? And dynamically, it's probably not going to be as aggressive. There's lots of challenges and things like that you're familiar with in these games, but it doesn't seem, at least surface wise, as big of battle, more challenge, maneuver, clever. So is that you? Or do you want the fixed, I'm going to go after the bad guy in Marvel Champions? Because that might also be something different for you then. Now we'll hop over and stay with this same train of thought and go with a couple other crowdfundings that are finally making their way to retail as well. One of my best games of 2023, Daybreak from CMYK. You know what? Awesome, fantastic game. But if you don't like this repetitive tableau building, pandemic-esque, cascading, I can see the end point of the game before the last turn or two, whether or not we're going to win or lose sort of playstyle, it might fall flat for you. And that's okay. Again, it's probably a little bit long for what it is. And so the other dynamic of just getting this carbon and eliminating it and having to total it up, it's a little It's a little anticlimactic. It's not the most, you're doing a lot of bean counting, essentially, in some of those phases. And the randomness that goes with those decks that you are pulling from, right? You've got your action card tableau deck that you're pulling from to build your hand and to build your tableau. You've got your positive effects deck, which you're going to be grabbing from and choosing at the beginning of each round which one you want to go with, which is completely a crapshoot, especially when you start playing it. You've also got the bad things deck, right? The pandemic-esque deck, where bad things are going to happen on a round-by-round basis. And you might not even know what's going to happen because you only have one of them flip face up, unless you can flip others face up. But then you also have to allocate and discard your cards in order to actually mitigate. So you may not even be able to mitigate, even if you wanted to, because you don't have it flipped up to know what to mitigate in the first place. Again, lots of randomness with those 3 different decks. Now it adds extra challenges, it adds extra nuances, changes the rules slightly with some of the advanced, modes and cards. But if you're not a pandemic person, if you're not a harder co-op person, this one's definitely not going to change your mind whatsoever. As fantastic as it is for me, it's not going to be anything for you and it's going to fall flat. It's okay. I think a good portion of people as well aren't a fan of the theme, of the global warming side of things. Oh, it's hitting too close to home, or I don't believe in that, or whatever, right? I don't care. But that also is a disconnect for people sometimes, And that's okay. We all have themes that we're big and lesser fans of. And if that's also how you choose to do it, this theme and these mechanisms, it's not going to be overwhelmingly, overpoweringly over your bias as well. And so if you're looking for that, awesome. If you're not, this one, again, probably isn't going to change your mind and convert you to a huge co-op fan like I am. That's okay. Still fun, though. But there you go. Next up, Deliverance. Also now going to retail. Angels versus Demons with a dungeon crawl-esque feel. I actually previewed it on the channel when it went on crowdfunding. Designer sent me a review copy that... Andrew, I'm sorry, I have not gotten to it. It has been crazy. So I apologize because I had meant to actually have something more finalized out with the review copy that is somewhat different than he said the original. So I'm really intrigued to see, but what is it actually going to entail? And it gives you a little bit of the boss battling dungeon crawl-esque feel. Again, thematically, do you care about that? Angels versus Demons at all? I like the mechanics, the shadow and the light mechanics as a whole. There's a lot of dice rolling. There's a lot of action mitigation. It's grid-based movement for your angels. And this game, to be very fair, even when I played the prototype copy, this was a hard game, folks. This was a very hard cooperative game. Now, it wasn't like a min-max, but boy howdy were the elements that added up in terms of having to battle the demons and their minions, having to upgrade your angels in order to get the right combinations of abilities. It was kind of a very thinky puzzle from a dungeon crawl-esque vibe, if you will. And so, dungeon crawl, do you enjoy those mechanics? The variability is there. You have tons of angels to play as. You have tons of demons to go up against. And the scenario-driven, sort of grid that they've got going on also is highly variable. But is that, again, something you're looking for? Because the setup and the teardown and the rules are going to be slightly longer, which is going to make it a little less accessible. It's going to run you probably an hour and a half to 2 hours for this. It's a little bit weightier when it comes to this style of game too. It's got over a 3 rating on Board Game Geek. Now, some of you are going to look at that and go, scoff, 3. I dine on that for breakfast in the morning as an appetizer. Well, the rest of us go, yeah, I don't have a ton of time to play and learn and do all that stuff. So is that going to be as accessible as something of Beer and Pretzels, Zombicide, or Marvel United, right? And the answer is no, it's not. So if those types of mechanics with epic fantasy as the theme is more for you, well, fantastic. But because of the, again, learning curve, because of the price point being a bit higher because of all that went into this, the production is fantastic, it's going to be a barrier to entry too. Does that matter to you? There you go. The other one that was on my radar that I will have a review coming out probably shortly after this video was Life of Amazonia. Crowdfunded. Reminds me very much of Everdell in the aesthetic, because you have this 3D cardboard waterfall that fits very nicely together if you're actually good at putting those together. I'm not. I had to have my wife help me do it. I'm not technical, folks. The fact that this channel works at all is a miracle. But it's more like a combination of Cascadia meets Quacks with a little bit more layers and a lot more length. But to be frank with you, it's a really good game. It is. It works. I didn't think that combination would work. The setup teardown is a little much, but they have these really cool token holders that are made out of cardboard, which I've never seen really utilized a whole lot elsewhere. So I was really impressed by that. As much as I didn't like the waterfall, the token holders are really cool. Now, there's tons of randomness, right? You get all these different animals. You get the A-B side with like your Cascadias, right? And you're bag drawing, bag building like your Quacks. And so you just draw stuff, but it takes the lemons and forces you to make cherry pie. No, lemonade, because that's what you got to do. Because you'll have like 3 different currencies that you're pulling out of the bag, and you're gonna have to decide, okay, how am I gonna mitigate these on one of the 3 steps of the waterfall, or the 4 steps actually of on the waterfall? Am I gonna go with the animals? Because the game ending is when enough animal spots have all been bought out. So how do I want to time the end game? How much do I want to engine build to get the money to buy the other stuff? How much do I want to get the food or the trees or the water in terms of buying a few of those other dynamics that are going to give my slowly building hex-based grid everything it needs? And it was concerning for me that it was going to be too much, but it's not. But again, hex tiling Cascadia. I know people don't like Cascadia whatsoever. Quacks is even more divisive. People are like, screw you, bag builder. And if you don't like either of those games, folks, this game is not going to change your mind. But if those games weren't heavy enough, then you maybe give it a look-see. But as well, lots of randomness because you're just pulling from the bag. The hardcore Euros that don't like Quacks, not going to like this one either. Bitoku. Bitoku's got an expansion out. You remember Bitoku? Does anyone remember Bitoku? Of course we remember Bitoku. It's up there on my shelf. It's hiding back there. And I was actually really impressed from a slightly heavier Devere Euro side of things that this one is actually still in my collection, because the mechanistic approach, although the rules are there, everything just fits so smoothly. Everything felt like it clicked, and I could see the pieces. I'm not good at those pieces together, but that's the question. With a heavier Euro like this, where you're going to have to play an hour and a half to 2 hours with the Bitoku decks and piles upon piles of tokens between all of the different areas, creatures that you're going to have to try and summon or get to your side. Again, that's a lot of randomness that you're pulling from, or which ones are going to come out and how their strategy is going to evolve. And the thing I worry about with an expansion like this, it's going to be bringing you 3 new modules that you can add to the base game. All 3 partialities, new yokai, that's creature cards, new rocks, and new types of water or the lake, and just more cards. So the question you have to ask yourself with an expansion, right? Is this going to help me get it played more? Is it going to make me like this game more? Or is it going to add more? I mean, that's why I didn't go for the recently crowdfunded last year Planet Unknown expansion, because I give them kudos. They said, hey, this expansion, this Supermoon expansion for Planet Unknown, as a polyomino tile laying sort of situation, it's going to add probably 15 to 20 minutes of the game. And I said, what? What? Wow. Okay, maybe I shouldn't get this, because, I mean, I feel like it could use a little something to spice it up for me. But at the same time, I said, this game is longer than a lot of my other polyomino games. And I like my polyomino games to be under-ish, 60, 75 minutes at most. And if this is going to bump that over routinely, especially at the higher player counts, Lazy Susan aside, which is one of the best things I've seen in polyomino creation, that makes me worried. And that's what I look at this is I go, okay, you have analysis paralysis, and then you're going to add more analysis paralysis options. And at what point does the point buffet, again, I don't use point salad on this channel in case you're new, because point salad doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. It's a point buffet, right? You pick and choose what you want, right? Like in a salad, you just kind of, if you're one of those picky salad eaters, we got to have words in the comment section. We got to talk. But anyway, too much of a good thing. You can have too many expansions that overcomplicate things. There are very few games that people go, yeah, you know what? All of the expansions, playing with all of that is super awesome. Playing with all of it is my favorite thing. It's my easiest thing to do with the game. Said no one ever. And this game has a 2021 release. I would argue that this has held its own pretty good. It's 300th on Board Game Geek. So it's well thought of. 2-hour games. How many of those can you play? Especially at the lower player counts. Because at the higher player counts, probably going to be a little higher playtime. Not that it's a bad thing. I like the game. Like, how many times does Liege Games say, on a heavy Euro side of things on my channel, boy, howdy, did I enjoy that. Right? That doesn't happen a whole lot. But I worry, you know, you got a couple cool things mixed in here, but it reminds me a little bit more of Cascadia Landmarks too. The problem with you bundling several of these different dynamic things together, right? Cascadia Landmarks did it. They threw in a 5 and 6 player expansion, and they threw in some more cool gameplay content. You know what we said? Cool gameplay content. Awesome. 5 and 6 player expansion. Don't need it. Probably would have paid half the price for it as well if you would have just separated them out, but they don't want to do that, right? It's easier and more cost efficient and more profit, I'm assuming, to throw them together. And so from that side of things, I'm not going to mispronounce the expansion's name, but maybe that's why you should pass on it as a whole. You know what? Let's piss people off even more, and let's go after instead the Unmatched folks this time. Unmatched Sun's Origin. I have it sitting in my cart, Game Nerds. But Unmatched, as I call on the channel, Chasing the Dragon, has yet to really sink its fangs into me fully. I have yet to find a character of the half dozen or so that I've played that I am super in love with, right? I play my bullets, I play my exceeds, I play, you know, those style of things, Summoner Wars, and you find the faction that you go, ho, 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 a little Tim Allen there, that I just love the manipulation of how this faction works. Mythic Mischief, another one. And for me, Unmatched has yet to do that. And I'm scared because I don't really want to go buy another expansion or two to try and find that. And I think Sun's Origin, I mean, you've heard me talk on this channel. I am a sucker for these Eastern themed games as a whole. The Japanese indies, you know, I am just, it's my blind spot, folks. I have horrible success with them as a whole, but it's still my blind spot. And is it really blind spot though, if I know it's my blind spot? Anyway, leave that in the comment section as well too. But that's the question. New board, new characters like 2 Samurai. I love the idea of it. But am I just better off waiting for Witcher in Q4? Or Shakespeare, whatever is in Q2 or Q3, whatever they got going on. And I just keep hoping that maybe one of these is going to, you know, give some portability like they did with, as I said in the other video, what Arcadia Quest did with Masmorra, right? Where they allowed you to port those characters in. And if you could port one of these samurai in as a boss to Tales to a Maze, I'd buy it in a heartbeat, but you can't. And that's the big snafu or the big question mark with this. And I think that's why ultimately you see people selling these huge collections is they just buy this as a whole, and they buy based on, I kind of loved it and I kind of liked it, but now you have this $400, $500 collection and you decide that your tastes are turning. I saw that happen with a couple of people who bought every single thing for Star Wars, the Funko game, where it was mimicking the online Marvel one as well, Marvel Snap. And then like, before it was even like completely out at retail, wide available, like a month later, people were selling it. So I see people doing that with Unmatched all the time. It's like Marvel Legendary, Marvel Champions. And so do you really buy that all? Or do you end up like me with Aeon's End, right? Oh, he's not talking about the mechanics anymore. I'll talk about the mechanics. We'll get there. But I'm stopping buying Aeon's End. Aeon's End just announced The Descent, a next campaign expansion. Standalone. That's a whole nother rant as well. I won't get into on this video. But I have too much of it. I have too much of it. And that's what people are running into with those other games. And that's why I'm saying with Unmatched. At the same time, Unmatched, I really, it's very simple. Move, play a card. Move, play a card. Don't draw the right cards, lose. Other person draws the right cards, you don't, lose. It's a slightly better version of the Star Wars one that it's based off of, Star Wars Epic Duels. But is it going to have the strategy, the just control that you want? No, because if you just draw the wrong cards, if you draw the wrong type of cards and your opponent doesn't, there is zero way to really mitigate it. You're better off just starting over. And that kind of is really irritating when I get my butt handed to me by my 9-year-old because I just can't get any of the cards I need, and Bullseye sucks. I stand by that. I do not like that character. Anyway, But it happens more in this game than a lot of the other one-to-one, head-to-head, dueling type games. And if you don't want that type of mechanistic approach, great. You should avoid it. You know, it's like more of a zombie side for dungeon crawlers for the 2-player, right? It's a more of a beer and pretzels-ish, right? I'll call Unmatched a beer and pretzels game. There you go. Hot take for this video. I'm going to piss people off probably. I'm sorry in advance. But not sorry. I'm not saying I don't like it. Not saying I'm not going to get this, but should you? If that's really kind of more of what it is. Yeah, I know. People in the comment section, oh, Chris, there's all sorts of tons of strategy. You're just not doing it. Folks, I know what I'm doing, but it still doesn't mitigate some of those things. I'm being a little bit over dramatic for the sake of me being over dramatic because it's fun and being a little bit glib on the channel. But if you also have played this game and you can sit back and say objectively, you know, yeah, I'm also right too, without being too over the top, because I am being too over the top. So let's go on to the next game before I get myself in too much trouble. Let's go to the heavier Euro side of things again, and let's go to Evacuation. This is sort of the reverse engine builder, where you have this huge engine to begin with, right? Spacefaring, and you're blowing up the planet, and you're trying to escape, and you're evacuating it, hence the name of the game. And you slowly devolve and have less and less and less and less, and you're optimizing as you go. And I thought this concept looked amazing. I thought this concept looked absolutely fantastic. But with almost the heaviest weight ranking of any of the games I've covered on this, don't buy it at retail as a whole, with nearly a 4 rating, I don't think I could be able to play this one. It's got a great pedigree, Suchi, you know, Underwater Cities, but I don't think that this is going to be something that I would be necessarily amenable to. It's got this really cool, sprawling board, but mechanistically, I just think it's going to be too much for me to handle. And the other question, again, just like I said with Bitoku, is how do you compare this to the other heavy Euros? How do you know? Do you have the time frame and the wherewithal? Because, you know, at least with some of these fillers, right? You can play them 2, 3, 4, 5 times. You're going to play this game once a year. Is that going to be worth the $60 or $70 price point, whatever it is? I mean, it's got some cool things mechanistically going on, right? You get your own individual set of technologies. You get action cards that are going to be dual playing, depending on what side you play, advanced effects, variants, playing them on your player board. But is it going to be just massively, sprawlingly too much? The interaction is minimal at best. This is solitaire solo play disguised as a multiplayer game, right? You're going to option action mechanistically optimize whatever you can do. And if you accidentally take someone's spot somewhere else on the board, well, that's going to be the amount or the extent of interaction that you're going to have. This concept of the main mechanism that several reviews talk about on Board Game Geek is how to properly manage both of these worlds that you're having to deal with at the same time. And this is an unforgiving game. This is a very unforgiving game that almost all of these reviews say as well. You have to do things correctly, multiple areas of attention intensely. Does that sound like a Euro that you want to do? I mean, that is what a lot of people want, but if that's something that you're trying to dip your toes into, or it's maybe even a little too cutthroat and multiplayer solitaire, not enough direct interaction for you or whatever, again, this one might fall out of your collection as fast as it, you know, can go into your cart. That was a good line. I'm going to use that again. Now, the next one, we'll go straight into it. It's a little bit lighter, but no less necessarily as thinky. It's Djinn from Pegasus Spiel. And this one, again, just like Evacuation, kind of got a little bit more of a strong Euro push post-Essen at the end of the year. And it's going to be shorter, but it's also one that I kind of said, oh, this sounds really cool. And then it's more of like a worker placement, unlocking the Djinn, going around to different locations style. And after I watched John Gets Games video, I just said, nope, no interest. The one main criticism on a couple of the reviews at this point tend to be, well, there's not as much tension as you may want out of this game from a Euro style. Randomized objective tokens, randomized objective cards. So no two games are going to be the same, but there's a lot of randomness and there's text and significant iconography you're going to have to be learning. And if you're like me, oh boy, another game with tons of iconography and hieroglyphics, right? It's a big step up. That's the other deceptive thing, is the weight says 2.7 on Board Game Geek, and it's going to be lighter if you're heavy Euro style, But if you're lighter style overall, this is maybe going to be a little bit too thinky for you as well. So those tweener games are good to dip your toes in, but good to dip your toes in if you're like me, who's experienced Bitoku or several of these other heavier wafers of the South Tigris, things like that. Not like, hey, I've played Ticket to Ride and Catan, and so I think this is going to be my no. And so that's the thing I worry about with a game like this. If you go in thinking it's going to be along those avenues, there's going to be a lot more going on than you're going to be able to, comfortably manage at first. And I hate seeing people dip their toes and being like, oh, geez, I never should have done this. I'm going to go back to Munchkin the whole time, right? And when these things fall in the hotness, I feel like sometimes people get lured in that way, myself included. So this one has a little bit of just a cautionary tale from that aspect of things. It's not been widely available, though, and there's not a ton of content out there, though. So if you want to pick it up and do your own content on it, maybe you could get some attention from that. So get it that reason? That's a bad reason. Every time I try and do that, it fails spectacularly, by the way. Then let's take one off the hotness next, and let's go to MLEM, Space Agency. Did you want to have cats on rocket ships in space? Well, from the same people that brought you First Rat, this is just, space astronaut cats, essentially. And you're flying through space, rolling dice, pressing your luck, trying not to crash, and disembarking from the rocket in order to get the bonuses or the points that you need in the first place. You go until somebody disembarks all 8 of their cats, or the rocket ship crashes a certain number of times. And like with First Rat, a couple variants to increase the variability and the difficulty, or the advanced play, if you will, but it's still cats in space, right? It's overall designed as a family game. And just like with First Rat, if you're not looking for a family game, even with some of these advanced variants, it still might not be enough for you. And this is heavily, heavily dice dependent, just like the next thing we'll talk about as well briefly. And so how do you feel about dice controlling your potential winning and crashing and burning potentially, literally and figuratively, in the game as a whole when it's so dice dependent? Personally speaking, I have no problem, although, again, to an extent. And so this is not going to be any different. It's going to be too light if you're looking for that. Dynamically press your luck rolling dice with 6 dice available to you. And if you just roll slightly better, someone else rolls slightly better, is it really going to be totally under your control for mitigation? And again, as a family light style filler, comparatively to your other fillers of the same length, ilk, and complexity, is it really standing out mechanistically, right? That's the other thing. It's nice to have things that you're familiar with, but I also feel like it has to do something differently enough. And based off of this, yes, but also no. I think it fits the length and category and complexity that I'm looking for, but I also worry that it's going to be a little too samey than something else in my collection. Not in the same total mechanistic approach, but in just this wasn't quite as fun as the other dice chucking games that I have similar ilk that are, similar, right? So that'd be my one concern there. Same thing with Lords of Vegas, has a new expansion from one of their crowdfundings coming to retail, and that's the Underworld expansion. And that's adding more decks, it's adding more randomness, it's adding more cards, and it's gonna be very dice rolling dependent, getting mobsters, showgirls, and accountants that you can use to line your pockets and grow your empire with private jets, blackjack halls, and betting with Sammy the Snail. I don't make this stuff up, folks. And so you're getting these new sky-high casinos that are going to be available to you. This is another game that's very well thought of. But the question, again, like I raised earlier, is how many expansions is too many? And does it overcomplicate the simplicity of the beauty of the original Lords of Vegas and why people love it in the first place? So that has to be a little bit of food for thought. Apart from that, your mileage is going to vary, because I know there's about 3 other expansions or so, give or take. And the question is, why this expansion over the other expansions? Do you love it enough? Do you have the other expansions in the first place? Would this replace another expansion? Or is it just going to add an element that you're not quite sure that you really want in the first place as well? So then we're going to talk about General Orders World War II. The 2-player, asymmetric, Osprey Games, loving worker placement with some area control set in, obviously World War II. Tug of war over a crucial World War II battlefield, the mountains of Italy or the islands of the Pacific. It's a war-themed game, and it's not a war game. So the war gamers aren't necessarily call it a true war game, just like they do with Undaunted, right? That's not a war game. And I know what they mean, but also at the same time, it's a little bit disingenuous. This is very similar, though. It's worker placement. Building around and upgrading your status quo. Combat is fast. Advancing, occupying is fast. One mode, but also a double-sided board to give you those 2 campaign areas to try and control. But just like something with Undaunted, just like something with a Twilight Struggle, the best that this is going to be done in a meta style is going to require repeated plays. Benjamin and Thompson, who put out these games, put out fantastic games. But the one thing I have seen along all of these lines is that the repeated play is going to be the most beneficial. Now, this one has a slightly lower weight. This one has a slightly lower playtime as a whole. So it's going to be more accessible. But on the contrast to the other stuff I've just mentioned, it's not going to be heavy enough for the wargamers. It's not going to be controllable enough for the wargamers. It's going to be too fast and swingy potentially for some of the Euro worker placement folks. I think Osprey puts out a solid product, but the mechanistic approach with this one, it reminds me a little bit more of like Blitzkrieg, you know, the one with the exclamation point, or Caesar, whatever in Rome, with the tile bag drawing building aspect of that, where it's a little bit light and it definitely has a different feel. But it also can fall flat too easier because some of those other layers aren't there to mitigate or to catch you when things don't go your way. And so is this going to fall in that zone for you? It's a tweener. It's a tweener. And these tweeners are very difficult to evaluate without hands-on. And I speak from experience there. Blitzkrieg. I thought that game was going to be a smashing hit. My wife hated it. Too random. Didn't like the... I love the mechanism, but this is doing something different with more of a worker placement style of things. And so I like the idea of it, but the actuality of it, that'd be where I'd be concerned about. Because, you know, with this type of game, my biggest concern as a whole, again, would be, I think I would like it, but I can't tell until I play it. And those are the most dangerous types, right? That was Fit to Print for me last year. That was Sail for me last year. Games I thought were going to be slam dunks. And this one, with a similar vibe and an easy 2-player play time, I just look at this and I go, oh. But I also know I'm not the biggest worker placement fan. I also know that these 2-player head-to-heads sort of, you know, with a non-card-based battling system kind of have fallen a little bit hit or miss for me as a whole. So if you're like me, maybe take that as a sign of, if you're not absolutely 100% sure, pass. Been there, done that. Last up, War of the Ring. Lord of the Rings. We're talking about the latest expansion for that. Kings of Middle-earth. Kings of Middle-earth. This is an easy one, folks. Do you have War of the Ring? You do? You don't need any expansions for it. I guarantee you haven't played it enough this past year to justify getting any expansions for it, because these expansions are going to add more content, more asymmetry, more factions, units on each side that you're going to have to try and memorize, and eventually get to the table with the 3-hour setup that it takes. Just kidding. You know what I'm saying, though. Like, this is the main reason I don't have this game. The overhead. The overhead just for the base game alone. And it's a pipe dream. But is more because the other 2 expansions, I think there's some division. One of them is really well thought of. The other is not as well thought of. And so just like with Lords of Vegas we just mentioned, just like with Bitoku, with the modules, is this going to be the expansion that adds that much more value and worth to a game like this that's already hard enough to get to the table? You can afford it. Can you justify it, though, in terms of playtime? Because again, I'm looking at this as a consumer player, not just collector. If you're a collector, awesome, go for it. But if not, how easy is this going to be incorporated based on how many times you're able to play the War of the Ring in the first place? Because this might be one of the best overall mechanistic as well as thematically incorporated games ever made. But as I always say, we'll end the video with this. If you can't get it to the table, is it really as good as you think it is? So those are your big retails of the month. That's all I got. Reasons maybe to not convince you to buy things, or to convince you to buy things, or to not convince you to buy things, depending on how that wordage just came out and whether I double negative or not there. I don't know. We'll leave that in post editing production, and maybe I'll just leave it in there because this is what you get at my videos, folks. Second tier YouTuber. So you know what? Average person like you doing videos, talking about board games, just having fun. And you know what? That's what this is about. That's why I like doing this. Because, you know, you heard me say with some of these games, right? I own Daybreak. I want the El Grande second copy, even though I have the first one. I have a copy of Deliverance as a review copy, right? I have Life of Amazonia. I kind of want Unmatched. So, like, I am not the poster child for following my own advice, but I'm also trying to help you prevent making my mistakes as well. Because some of this stuff, like I said, I review. So some of it comes to me easier that way, or I do it to talk about it in the channel. But if you're not doing that as well, you know, it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to keep up with the hotness of people on my side of things either. Don't. Actually, my advice is absolutely don't. Because it's not fun with some of these pressures of getting some of this stuff out to talk about in the first place. Which is why I do a lot of these videos, because these are just no pressure, low pressure, fun style of things where I can rant, ramble, and get myself in trouble. As I've done already like 2 or 3 times this month. Get those random emails or random messages. I'm just not very good at keeping my mouth shut sometimes. But I love it anyway, and I get a lot of grace and mercy and stuff that I don't deserve either way. So we are somewhere in the 9,000s. I don't know. I don't look at my subscriber count now. All I know is we're over 9,000. I know, it's the WWII reference. You're going to get it all month. I don't really pay attention. It's fun. It's fun, though. So that's all I got. Stay classy. Ramble, end, ramble, over. Peace out. I love having a channel and just talking about whatever I want to. I know it probably pisses so many people off, you guys, or turns people off of not wanting to tune in, but it's just, I have fun with it. And if you can't have fun with it, why do it? Thanks for watching. But it also is more like a combination of Cascadia meets... I can't remember.